to you now.
Thank you so much, Lynn. It's a joy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to take part in the wellness seminars that you're actually hosting. It's a great initiative that we actually have, and I'm very pleased to be here, to tell you a bit more about the good and the bad of COVID in Ballarat. The program of work that we are implementing at the moment is the first phase of the program of work is actually coming to an end. It was a program of work that was commenced pretty much 48 hours after the initial pandemic announcements were made. We were actually realising that as a society and as a city, this would have a massive impact on our operation. It certainly, there's been some interviews that we have done subsequent to the program where we recognised that it was within 48 hours we actually had a very significant issue on our hands concerning not just emergency messaging, the reassurance that was required, the reaching out to different forms of community in order to shut certain aspects of the city down. It was the phrase unprecedented times for us, at any rate, was actually a phrase that was bandied about a lot. But what we actually discovered was within 48 hours, when we had actually sorted out the emergency programming, we'd actually coordinated where we understood the direction of the city to be going. We recognised then that we needed to fill the gap, and the gap was going to be pretty much very clearly going to be a need to support our arts and creative sector. So the arts and creative sector around our city is quite significant. It represents about 4% of all of Ballarat's jobs. There's just under 2,000 roles across the city that we recognise that actually fit within the creative industries and creative practitioners. And they fall across the spectrum. So the arts and culture unit within the city of Ballarat is responsible for ensuring the sustainability of those practitioners. So we are first and foremost concerned about their economic health, their sustainability as micro businesses, and then obviously their opportunity to expand and grow as practitioners within the city. So our focus has always been on offering resources, opportunities for training, opportunities for individuals to expand their knowledge base, and opportunities to expose their work, to bring it to new audiences. We take care of everyone from the tiny arts practitioner who might just be practicing on their kitchen table, enjoying it as a hobby, which is fantastic, all the way across to a professional artist who is looking to exhibit their work or to take on new challenges. I have to apologise in advance for the noise. I've got some action happening behind me. I actually have a leather worker and a silver worker actively working just on the other side of that door. So if there's any noise, that's where that's going to be coming from.
All good.
So the idea of the supporting the practitioners, it's a staggered pathway approach, and that had been put into place over the last 18 months before the pandemic actually struck. So we have dedicated funding and budgets. It's, they're a small proportion of the overarching city budget, but we make it a little go a long way. The Creative City program is designed to integrate creative thinking across all aspects of what the city does and tries to embed creative thinking at the heart of decisions that are taken by the events team, by tourism, by marketing, by planning, by facilities. We have the mandate to go inside to those departments and to try and crack open creative thinking in those environments and link them with our arts and culture initiatives. So it was that thinking that we actually applied once the pandemic struck. So the lockdown happened, the emergency messaging went out, emergency teams were formed across all forms of council, and you would think automatically that arts and culture would be the thing that you put on the side, that we have to worry about. Quite rightly, we have to worry about coordinating rubbish, ensuring our roads are still operational, making sure that health messages are getting clearly through, that our most vulnerable in our society are immediately taken care of. And that was taking place. But it became quite apparent quite early on that our executive leadership team at council was very keen to see arts and culture embedded in our response. And we had 48 hours to compile a strategic response as to how we would embed creativity during what was going to be pretty much an unknown quantity of time, and pretty much an unknown pressure points. At that point in time, everyone was anxious, very highly stressed. The concept of a lockdown seemed urgent and important and necessary, and we were all in a highly stressful moment. Probably still are, it's just slightly different stresses now. The creative response was designed to look at several different categories. One was, obviously, we knew that by shutting down performances, live music, venues, cafes, our audience, our creative sector, who lives gig to gig, who lives performance to performance, they would be the first to suffer. So they were going to be our canaries down the mine, and quite rightly, within 48 hours, we could see that response. We could see the impact. We could see the cues at Centrelink, that the decision to lock down a city has an enormous impact on our most vulnerable. So that was one group we knew we needed to take care of. The other issue was that we had no idea how long lockdown was going to go for. It could go for months. So that then meant we had a whole tranche of mainstream community who would be looking for distraction, who would be looking for information, who would probably be looking for entertainment. We did know that schools were going to be closing down, so all of a sudden the pressure on families, we could anticipate that there was going to be a massive stress, but we didn't quite know how big it was going to be. So with these sort of pressure points in mind, we had 48 hours to design a strategy response. And that's where the COVID response, it was called at the time, which then morphed into the name Be Kind, Be Creative, was born. It's Be Kind, Be Creative is 10 different initiatives, and it's a very wide and eclectic bunch of programs. Now, some of them were designed to be one way, very much about the information providing, about here is something that a local person has done that you might be interested in knowing a bit more about. So it's not designed to necessarily to inform you about dangerous issues or the pandemic itself, but it's actually here is something that a creative person has made and they would like to share it. So it was what we call the one-way information. Then there was the two-way material where we knew that community members, once you're stuck in a lockdown situation, I want to be able to contribute. I want to be able to add my voice. I want to be able to record my feelings, whether that's hopelessness or fear or concern or stress or just I've changed my whole life direction as a result of this. So we needed to design activities that responded to that. So the 10 projects themselves actually fell into all these different categories. And then we have to also bear in mind that we're not just servicing now our creative sector, which is quite small and very concentrated. We're actually looking to service the entire city. So we needed to take in multicultural issues. We needed to take in Indigenous voices. We needed to take in all of the diversity of voices that exist in the city. And I think overwhelmingly, the real issue for us was this is actually really an exciting opportunity because we couldn't actually see any other state government or local government body at all doing that sort of approach. So we had no one to bounce off. It was created in a vacuum, created in 48 hours, and then released. So the strands of ideas, we first went with the materials we could grab quickly, and that was actually our creative organisations, our individuals. We put the call out and said, we were going to open up your studios as part of an open studio program. That has sadly been cancelled. Please just pick up your iPhone or your smartphone, run around your studio and take us on your tour of your home, your studio, your practice. And it didn't matter how good or how bad your recording was, we were happy to receive it. So we took receipt of probably, I think, about a dozen of those, and we edited those together. So we actually polished them up, shined them up, added some music, made them easier to watch, gave them some context, and then housed them online. And that then started the ball rolling for people to understand that actually, that this two-way conversation they could have with council was actually a really healthy one for them to learn a new skill. was for them to try something completely differently, get out of their own comfort zone. So those resources were our first port of call. They were quick, they were easy to produce. From there, we went on to set creative challenges specifically to some of our performance groups around town. I know that we'll be finishing off today with one of those challenge responses. So we set challenges to some of our different creative groups around town, asking them the question: if you could give a message to the city right now about what we're going through, what would it be? What would you take? What would you leave behind from yesterday, and what would you take forward to tomorrow? And we deliberately went wide to a wide array of different creative groups to ask that question, because now is a time that we shouldn't be listening to prevailing voices. We should be listening to voices who are experiencing a very different understanding of social norms right now. This is an opportunity to upend the cup, so to speak, and to actually really listen and understand how we've managed to get to this position, what type of pain different groups are going through, and how we can move forward to retain those voices once we are back on an even playing field, if we're ever going to get there, because who knows with this pandemic. The next level of work with Be Kind, Be Creative then became a lot more in depth, and that was actually what we started calling our two-way program. And there are two leading programs that come out of that, which are our podcast series called Once Upon a Lockdown, and our children's television series, which is 6 editions strong, called BTV. Now, the Once Upon a Lockdown, I have a really soft spot for it, because all of those elements that we've just been talking about, having alternative voices, the real experience of our city, like the stuff that's traditionally not necessarily front and foremost. So conversations with multicultural communities, conversations with Indigenous communities about a real life rather than actually one that's been polished. We got an opportunity to hear directly from the stories of people whose lives were directly affected, both positively and negatively, by the pandemic lockdown. Because we are very fortunate. We're an isolated regional city. We've responded very quickly to the pandemic and lockdown, and our processes and our information was clear. So we're very much on the outskirts of the reverberation. We're no New York. We're no Brazil. We are quite isolated, but we're actually feeling the reverberations economically, and we're feeling the reverberations socially. So we have a duty as council right now to record that moment in time, and to then, as I say, upend the cup and give people new voices. The editions of Once Upon a Lockdown, of which the last episode is going to into recording this week, has been eye-opening. It's been a joy to listen to. The stories are compelling, and it just gives me a rush every time. I still now harbour feelings about the first episode where we listened to the story of a gentleman by the name of Moses, a refugee, and he talking about, because we were actually the theme of the episode was facing adversity, and Moses quite rightly said, "This is not adversity. I have been through adversity. This is something different." This is, for him, it was a very different story that he had to tell. And to hear that refreshing take on, we're so inundated with news in a 24-hour cycle that, funnily enough, we've got so many different places we can get our information from, but it's still not giving us truth often, or people's truth, realities that live, that we felt that we had this opportunity to actually listen to the voices from across our community and actually capture them for posterity, because I think that's also going to be important part of this program. So the podcast itself has been probably one of my most fondest. The other program, which is having the most impact at the moment, is our children's television series called BTV. Every single part of these creative pieces have been created by so we have the voices of the community, obviously, within them, but the people who make the products as well, they're all local. They're all people who would otherwise be doing other things, but we've harnessed them in and pulled them into these productions. And that is the spin-off of the economic stimulus, because we're paying people to participate, we're paying for people's ideas, we're paying commercial rates for producing this series of 10 projects. And when you boil it all down, that's actually what this is ended up being. Be Kind, Be Creative is an economic stimulus program for the creative sector. Whether you're a micro business, an individual supplier, or even a small to medium-sized enterprise. We were the first local government to see that the arts and culture sector is an economic sector in its own right, and to support that sector economically, but then also to understand it has a knock-on effect to the morale and the position of the whole city. So we've coupled this program with economic research as well. So we started off the program at the beginning asking our arts and creative sector to self-report on the impact of how the pandemic has affected them. So to tell us the proportions to which they actually, of their salary that they got, we didn't ask them for their actual salary, just asked them the proportions of their salary that they actually secured through the creative industries pre-COVID. And then we asked them, oh, now what's happened now? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? What's the proportions? Unsurprisingly, the proportions of obviously from people who were securing a full-time salary through the arts and culture sector have dropped substantially, but they haven't disappeared. And that's the thing for me I want to grip onto, is that in actual fact, there is a resilience to that arts and culture sector, which is just, hopefully we'll see this through. And if we've done anything to support that group economically through this period of time, then that's a huge tick for us as a council. What I did find actually was really interesting was that there's a very tiny group, but is there nonetheless, of people's creative sector who expanded during this time. And I'm not at all surprised because I know personally that by investing in 10 programs, I couldn't find videographers around the town, around the city in the end, because I was using them all. So there were certain skill sets with everything moving online. If you could actually film things, if you could actually produce things and stream things online for Facebook, if you knew about the digital divide, if you could cross that digital divide, and then you were actually really well set. And there's certainly groups who have expanded their production levels during COVID. Yes. So it's been a really, really interesting program. It's, as I said, it's coming to an end now. I think there's a team of two and a half of us that actually sit at the core. But the other interesting thing to actually bear in mind from a funding perspective is that this rich project of individual programs within it was not funded through arts and culture programming funding. We have not touched our existing core of investment in the arts and culture sector. Now, this has actually been harnessed from across the council from a variety of different other avenues. Programs that did come to a halt were having to come to a halt because of COVID. It just completely, I hate the word, pivoted. And the benefits were directly felt by a very small but powerful group in our city. And I think this is, I stand back every now and again and I just go, I can't believe we've actually created this. That firstly, there was the confidence in the city to just go, sure, let's go do it. We have no evidence that it's going to work, but let's go give it a go. It sounds like it makes sense. And then we actually had a project team that came on board that took care of every single element with professionalism and care. And then on top of all of that, we had a reactive level, so we could actually respond to projects when they popped up. I don't know if anyone's seen Random Collab, which has popped up around town. This was just the energies and efforts of one guy who said, wouldn't it be great if we just got a whole handful of artists together that don't know each other? I'm going to match you up, and you've got 7 days to create something together, and you then need to share it with us. So we saw that pop up. And we said, great, it's a perfect example of how we need to be able to support our makers and our creatives. So we invested in Random Collab, and now you can physically see the results of that at Unicorn Lane up in the display boxes. It'll be changing over again tomorrow. So it has been an amazing ride. I'm really, really, really glad that it's coming to an end.
Yeah, no, well done. Yeah, well, we've really noticed it all, and it is not just nurturing for the artists and everyone involved in the projects, but of course then for everyone who connects with it, and also just to know that we live in a city where this work is important, and that is very nurturing just in its own, just to know that I think is really important. So what I think we might do, thank you, Tara, we'll take some questions. If people have any questions, but we might just play an example because I think that's a really good way of people understanding some of the ways in which this creativity and supportive practice is coming into play. So just invite everyone to sit back and take a deep breath and relax and enjoy this lovely little video from Yum Studios, from Erin at Yum Studios. And as so, okay, we'll do that.
This time, it's brighter. Our fingers interlocked to block the flare, weaving. Stories and images being crafted and wrapped like presents delivered to our future. Stitching of yarn, switching of screens, coding. We are ones and zeros, 101s and 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s. We are odd. Scanning the horizon for a more stable connection, waving our arms in repetitions, but not drowning. Glimpsing our reflections, we hold our breath underwater for slightly longer than last time. Forced introspection marks us like looking straight into the sun, learning. Making a home in a hall of mirrors, our voices echo with the beat of our hopeful hearts, reverb, rebound, marking time. Anticipating the resolve of the beautiful, uncomfortable, shimmering cadence. Burning. Home fires light up our front doorsteps, ready to receive the warmth of the sun, yearning, dreams like birds wheeling in the unexpectedly clear sky.
Then I think that people needed instruction that they needed to actually click on the Yearning by Yum Studios on the screen in front of them
Oh,
at the
they
moment.
couldn't see what I,
Yes.
so they couldn't see what I was
So
doing.
they could see, I think you enjoyed it yourself though, so that was actually a
Oh dear.
technology, yes. Yes, there is actually a link there up on the screen that if people want to actually look at it and
So do
yes.
people want to click that? Well, it's only a minute, so I would encourage people to do that.
Yes.
Otherwise,
That was actually Yum Studios was one of our groups that we actually set the challenge to asking them to interpret the moment. And the joy of that particular piece is that it was produced very early on, probably within about 2 or 3 weeks of the actual lockdowns. So there was a lot of, and that's what because the situations do move, like the challenges move, the attitudes move. There wasn't a sense of tiredness about the lockdown at the time. There was a different sense. There was panic and fear, and we're locked in together. So these are time capsules. They're something we can go back to and actually sort of say, as a regional city, this is emotionally where we were at various times. So there's different powerful pieces. Another piece done by Ginkgo Productions was, which was funnily enough, we didn't decide on a gender split, but the Yum Studios program was all female and Ginkgo Productions was all male. So it was interesting that the responses were different from those groups. But it's left us with a body of work that we can be incredibly proud of, as well as not just the materials are good for some individuals. So there's certain groups, audiences that Young Studios program is good for, but it leaves other younger groups cold. So we supported the Sanitised Streaming Music Festival over 2 nights as part of the program as well, because demographically they were not being reached by some of our other stuff.
That's right.
So yeah, we've had over in excess of 14,500 visits to the website and engagement with the productions and materials that we've actually produced. And a growing number of people outside of the city are now paying attention to what we're doing, which is fantastic.
Yes, that's right. I think reaching those areas that aren't normally reached, I mean, as you say, the young ones, but I'm also thinking people that don't normally engage with the arts. And I know that that lovely soul music that George Williams and other people did was just gorgeous. But I'm also, thinking of people that just don't normally engage with the arts, how we reach them.
The funny thing is that, I think what we probably need to do is actually change our language about saying people who don't engage with the arts, because it's actually not true. We all do, whether we're watching Netflix or reading a book or whatever it is we're doing, or even taking in YouTube or playing a game, like playing an online game. We all engage with the arts. And that was what the challenge is with regards to arts and culture, is to give people access and pathways into the creative sector that doesn't feel like it's the front of a church, like it doesn't feel like it's hard to get into, and it doesn't feel it's impenetrable. Like it's actually has to be accessible, because we actually do consume the arts on a daily basis. It's actually part of what we do. It's who we are as human beings, and that's why you're quite right. The Virtual Soul Choir by George and Jeffrey Williams was a local piece of music written by local composers, and they did a call out just saying, give it a crack, see how you feel. But behind the scenes, it was all incredibly professional. So we had professional, George and Jeffrey are well-known choir masters, like they are trainers, so they stepped people through it. So I think that probably the secret is making it easy and accessible, exciting to get involved in creative activity. And then once they're in, you gently provide pathways to help expand knowledge and talent and skill and experience. So we do celebrate the practitioner and their practice, but we make it easy for everyone to join. So yeah, it's got to be a little bit of everything.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you, Tara. Thank you so much. I would encourage people to click on the Vimeo link or visit indeed the Creative Ballarat site and click onto those stories. I'm sorry that everyone wasn't enjoying that wonderful video the same way I was. But thank you so much. I think it's really important that we do take our creative selves back, it's not back really, it's still with us. So this time of uncertainty, it needs our creative selves to deal with it as well as we can. And so thank you so much, Tara, for being with us today. And let people know that next week is the last in this wellness series. I thank all of you who have been on the journey with us for what will be 14 weeks next week to finish up the series. And psychologist Kate Skilbeck is going to join us and speak about how we as individuals can grow and our personal and social relationships during and beyond COVID. So thanks, everyone. See you next week. And thanks again, Tara. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Bye now. Bye.